Debbie Barton Grant, CEO of the Jewish Federation, and on behalf of myself and our president, Beth Clapper, who's going to wrap us up tonight, we want to welcome all of you and wish you all a very happy Sukkot. I loved that picture that was playing with the funky music at the beginning. Every time I step onto the grounds of Newfields, I feel so lucky that we have such a gem in our community. And so we're super excited about tonight. And if you haven't been out to Newfields lately to walk around the grounds, you should do that, or to go inside, obviously, which we're going to hear more about, but thank you. Before I lay out for the program for the evening, I again want to thank each and every one of you for joining us tonight and for all that you do for our community. Whether you're a donor to the Jewish Federation or a volunteer to our community's annual campaign or both, we cannot do the things that we do without all of you. We wouldn't be able to impact the lives that we touch every day of the year without your help and without your support. So again, thank you so much for everything that you do. As you know, our community's annual campaign provides the basic infrastructure and support that supports our local Jewish community. It delivers vital funding to sustain the Federation and all of its partners, and it ensures that critical programs and services are available to all who are interested or need them. It's why we are here to respond when a crisis strikes, and it is why we are here for the community long after that crisis is over. Many of you have heard plenty of times over the past 6 or 7 months what challenging and unprecedented times we are in right now. Your generosity has helped the Jewish Federation and our entire community navigate this pandemic and the resulting economic crisis that has hit so many people so hard throughout our community. The pandemic has also meant that we cannot come together in person quite yet, as we are accustomed to doing so many times throughout the year. And this has led our professional staff at the Jewish Federation and our volunteers who are our partners to become even more innovative, and has resulted in many ways in some exciting new collaborations, such as tonight's program. I want to take a quick moment to thank David Barrett for helping to make the connection once again between the Jewish Federation and Newfields for tonight's program. And I want to thank all of the professionals, both at Newfields and the Jewish Federation, and all of our volunteers at both organizations for the hard work that has gone into making tonight's program possible. I also want to thank once again our longstanding partner and sponsor, the National Bank of Indianapolis, for supporting the important work that we do and the work of so many nonprofits across our community. They've supported us for many years, and we really value the relationship with them and allowing us to do some unique programming throughout the year. Additionally, I want to thank Newfields for providing us with such a special opportunity to come together tonight. And it's my pleasure to invite Charles Venable, the Melvin and Bren Simon Director and CEO at Newfields, to share some remarks and to offer his welcome on behalf of Newfields. Charles?
Well, thank you so very much. It's such an honor and a treat to be here this evening. I too want to give a double shout out to the National Bank of Indianapolis. As you said, they are generous to so many of us nonprofits in the community, and we are blessed by being one of those organizations that they support. And David Barrett and Jackie, also extraordinary supporters of ours. David is our current vice chair and our incoming chair next year. And yes, he has been instrumental of taking a partnership that we've had in many ways for a very long time. We clearly have lots of constituents in common. We have had many of the folks on this call and beyond as docents, supporters, trustees, et cetera, for years and years. And we're really thrilled to have David help us really make this a little more formal. So we hope to have many more types of opportunities like this to share insight and community together going forward. I'm really pleased that this will This particular program tonight features Anna Stein, one of our great curators. She's our curator of works on paper, who will be talking to you about our Edward Hopper show we have up. But beyond tonight, I know this will also give you an opportunity to come out to our Harvest Festival that kicked off on the 1st. Last year, if you came, it was literally a 3-day weekend. We thought we might be lucky to get 5,000 people over Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. We had 13,000 people show up. And that's pre-COVID. And we were like astounded and somewhat traumatized by having more than double the number of people we expected to show up. And so this year we have both days and nights. And I can tell you the demand is enormous. I think it's a wonderful thing for the community, but also, of course, we're all anxious to get out of our house if we can do so safely. And so there's a lot of demand. And I can tell you, if you're going to take advantage and come out to Harvest Days soon, it'll run till the 25th of October. We have taken every possible precaution, as I'm sure you're doing in your buildings and on your grounds, to make you feel comfortable, but also make you safe. So do bring your mask. There's probably a little competition at the Art Museum. So who has the coolest mask out there? I also think you will be, if you haven't been there in a little while, the grounds over the last couple of years, we too have had a capital campaign, have really, thanks to that, which is a little bit ongoing. We have some other projects coming up in the gardens, but we've really gone from having the grounds behind the Art Museum to having the gardens at Newfields, which our goal is to make it one of the great botanical gardens of the United States over the coming years. So I think you will not be disappointed by how great the gardens look. And I can tell you, we have almost, I jokingly say, there are no more pumpkins to buy in the state of Indiana, because we purchased over 10,000 pumpkins for your enjoyment for this wonderful kickoff to the fall season, but also the kickoff to many of our greatest holidays throughout the year. So thank you very much for being partners with us. We hope we have many more opportunities to share going forward. And I think you'll really enjoy Anna's talk tonight. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Charles. Thank you for your partnership, your leadership, and the important role that Newfields plays in our community, both here in Indianapolis and for Central Indiana. We look forward to partnering with you on many more programs in the future. I've heard some little bits of ideas around the lights around Hanukkah time. And so I think we've got lots of opportunities to bring our communities together. So thank you so much. Now, as we have promised you, we are in for a special treat tonight. As we celebrate the Jewish holiday of Sukkot and the Harvest Festival at Newfields, we will learn more about the connection between these two a little bit later this evening. For now, we're about to enjoy an exclusive behind-the-scenes access and a discussion with Anna Stein, the curator of the Edward Hopper and the American Hotel exhibition at Newfields. The exhibition looks at the late iconic artist's fascination with places of transience, escape, and anonymity. To tell you a little bit about Anna and her background, she serves as the assistant curator of works on paper at Newfields. She manages and provides curatorial oversight at Newfields' collection of over 20,000 prints, drawings, and photographs, including the museum's renowned collection of watercolors and prints by JMW Turner. Anna has curated photography exhibitions such as National Abstractions, Brett Weston and his Contemporaries, as well as collaborated on numerous past exhibitions like 19 Stars of Indiana, Art, Chemistry, and Color, and Audubon, Drawn to Nature. She started at Newfields in 2015 as the curatorial assistant for European and American paintings, sculpture, and works on paper. And before coming to Indianapolis, she was a research associate at the Detroit Institute of Arts. Anna received her MA in art history from Penn State. As we move forward with tonight's program, I invite all of you to use the chat feature at the bottom of your Zoom screen if you have any questions during the program. And just a reminder, we are in a meeting setting, not a webinar setting. So if you want to keep yourself muted while Anna is talking to us, just so we don't hear any background yelling at your children or anything like that. We appreciate that. And then again, put some comments or questions in the chat and I will help to facilitate that. And then We'll bring it back when Anna's done in about 30 minutes or so. So thank you. And Anna, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for that introduction. I'm really excited to be here with everyone tonight, and I'm going to be doing a screen share with some images for you all. So I will jump right into that. I think you've seen plenty of my face. Let me just do a quick switch. All right, if that looks good to everybody, we will kick it right off. I think. Oh, there we go, sorry. There's always, something has to go wrong, right? It wouldn't be a Zoom meeting without something going wrong. So I'm really excited to be talking about Edward Hopper and the American Hotel. I know after this, you're gonna get the full rundown of some outdoor experiences you can have at Newfields, but inside we have a really wonderful exhibition by a fantastic and talented artist. So I'm hopefully gonna talk for about maybe 15 minutes and then we'll have the floor open to questions. Because I'm talking for a relatively short amount of time, I'm just going to focus on a few of the best and most exciting paintings by Hopper in the exhibition. Obviously, your questions can touch on anything you want, but there's about 100 works of art in this exhibition. So I'm only going to be giving, you know, almost the briefest of peeks into the most exciting parts, hopefully just enough to whet your appetite if you haven't seen the exhibition already. This exhibition was originally organized by curators at the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts, and I always like to start with a shout out to them. This was their brainchild, and me and the team here at Newfields really adapted this exhibition to a Newfields audience. So I've started off with the entrance to the exhibition. We like to open it with a quote by his wife, Josephine Hopper. Right here we have, "I'm getting such a kick out of seeing not only America, but Americans." And Edward and Josephine Hopper traveled together all across the country. Edward Hopper is known as this great, fantastic American artist whose work really covers, his best known period covers the 1930s through the 1960s. He's often portrayed as an all-American artist. I think that mid-century narrative of the all-American man sort of forging his own path really informed a lot of his career as it has been passed down to us. But his wife, Josephine, who is in the picture that I'm showing at left, actually managed his career for him, and all of the travel that really influenced his paintings, because the theme of the exhibition is that Edward Hopper's great paintings were really informed by his fascination with hotels, motels, and temporary travel spaces. And she was traveling with him, and everything we've learned about his work to inform the exhibition itself came to us through the letters and diaries that she wrote while they were on the road. So I love starting off all my presentations with a sort of nod to both Edward and Joe Hopper together. She also was the first person to really get him a successful art show. For years, he didn't really have success until later in life, but for years he worked as a commercial artist, and his hotel experiences really begin there. I'm showing two images from a series of periodical covers that he created in the 1920s for magazines like Tavern Topics and Hotel Management, which were actually magazines for hotel owners, hotel managers. The contents were dreadfully dull, right? It was about how to arrange the furniture in your lobby, how to best manage your staff, you know, what the latest, high traffic carpet brands were. But he was in charge of putting this glamorous cover on the outside, you know, something to sell. And he started at this very early point in his career, drawing on this stock of images that evoke the spirit of travel and that evoke being in a hotel, even without explicitly saying you were in a hotel, right? We have people pulling up with someone ready to help them with their baggage. We have people, you know, fine dining with the entertainment experience in the background. So right from the very beginning, what I'm going to try to focus on here with my talk today is how sort of he draws on this same sort of stash of hotel imagery to create an experience or a feeling for people who look at his art. So I showed these very early commercial art products, and I wanted to show a slide with two images from his very early fine art. And these pieces, although made very early in his career before he was successful, really sort of set the stage for what his paintings look like throughout his career and how he draws on hotel imagery throughout his career. And so it's really quite fascinating for me, and something that the curator in Virginia always says, and that I like to repeat on his behalf, is this exhibition isn't a Where's Waldo of hotels in Hopper's paintings, right? We don't want to just go through and say, oh, there's a hotel, there's a hotel. What we really like to think about is how Hopper used imagery and the design elements and the furnishings of hotels to create a feeling of transience. A lot of his paintings we like to think about as capturing a moment that feels like maybe somebody was traveling and may travel again, but they've paused for a moment, right? And anyone who's traveled and has had that moment where you've sat down in your hotel, maybe you've got an hour and a half till you go on to the next thing, right? And you have this moment of rest, of isolation, but not necessarily in a bad way. It can depend on the experience. Hopper has often been described as a painter of loneliness, but we like to say that, it's not necessarily loneliness. For somebody who's an introvert, that moment of quiet really can be a wonderful thing, right? So in this painting and this etching, which I'm showing here, Hopper uses sort of a stash of props and design elements to make you feel what we call sort of a hotel-ness, even though neither of these say explicitly, right? This is 11 a.m., not 11 a.m. in a hotel. This is the open window, not the open hotel window, but they still convey the sense of a hotel room, and that we see well-worn furniture, standard equipment like a dresser without anything on it, a lamp, some blank paper on the table, a sort of generic looking framed print on the wall. And again, somebody paused as if in a moment of transition in their life. And this appears again and again in paintings throughout the exhibition and in art by other artists. In the exhibition, we actually have these two images hanging next to two photographs, one from the 1970s and one from the early 2000s, by photographers who were inspired by these same moments of pause and transience that somebody might experience in a hotel. And they show people sort of sitting in the same slumped posture as well, which I find very interesting. It's somebody kind of caught unawares in a moment all by themselves. So I showed some of the interior props and design elements that Hopper used to sort of set the stage. He also was very famous as a painter of buildings on the exterior. And there's sort of a general rule of thumb that I like to reference when I'm talking about this exhibition, which is that Hopper, if he's painting an interior like the ones we just saw, it's often a pastiche. He's pulled together different elements from different hotel rooms that he's seen throughout his life because he did travel quite a bit. But when you're looking at an exterior by Hopper, it's usually an actual place that he sat outside and in this instance sketched. And I show some of the sketches here. In the exhibition, we try to have as many sketches paired with their paintings as possible to show how he worked through his ideas, how he drew the building from a number of different ways and decided how far in the living room window we're going to be able to look. So this building, Room for Tourists, is an actual tourist home, which was a common type of temporary lodging in the 1930s, 40s, that was near his vacation home on the Cape in Massachusetts. And in the spirit of travel, Hopper actually sketched this house from his car that he had parked in the road outside. And you can actually kind of tell the angle, right, is a little low, like he's sitting in the car. And there were comments we know from his wife's diaries and letters that the people inside this lodging house were actually getting a little creeped out because this guy was just sitting and staring, for hours on end from his car window. Yeah, he's sort of representing hotels, in this case, very literally from the outside, and capturing the glow, right, of a welcoming space. If you were in your car traveling on the road, you would see this building with its sign illuminated, showing you that there was rooms available, and with this warm, glowing space that, represented this beacon of sort of hope and safety on the road, because of course this was a time before you were Google mapping the nearest place to stop or had anything reserved in advance online. Again, when I mentioned that pastiches, that he used pastiches when he did interior scenes, I of course couldn't do this presentation without showing the painting in the exhibition that's from our own collection, one of the few things that didn't come in from another museum. This is our own hotel lobby by Edward Hopper, one of the most wonderful paintings in the exhibition, and it is a pastiche. He made it based on a number of hotel lobbies he saw walking around New York City, where he lived and spent most of his career. And this painting is very interesting. The way he assembled the painting itself is very much like the way a hotel manager would assemble a lobby. So there's sort of this repetitive layering of elements, and I'll break it down for you a little bit. So in the 1940s, if you were managing an urban hotel, times were tough, right? These were wartime. This was wartime, and you would have been trying to conserve money, conserve resources where you could. This was, of course, a time of rationing. Um, and if you were in the city and had this old hotel that had been extant for a long time, you would try to have as much of your permanent furnishings, things like the desk, right, that we see, be as classic as possible, right? You didn't want anything too trendy that would go out of style quickly because you didn't want to have to spend money replacing it. Whereas elements like the carpet, you could save money by having a strip of carpet in the most well-walked area that you could then replace. But also the carpet strip was a very helpful tool, and we can read about this in the hotel management magazines that Hopper was illustrating. The carpet strips were used to arrange furniture and to direct guests, right? As they walked in, they knew how to get straight to the lobby. It kept your traffic flow smooth. And then you would maybe switch out the chairs for something a little more contemporary every time they wore out, things like that. So the curator at Virginia really passed down this depth of knowledge. She researched every aspect of this painting and pinpointed it to the date that it would have been designed, so that you could see how Hopper was very thoughtfully using this pastiche of elements from different parts of the 1940s and the 1930s, just the way that somebody who was actually designing a hotel lobby would have done so. But he also used these elements to create the emotional elements in the painting, and to create what we call in our history the compositional elements, the way everything kind of fits together on the canvas aesthetically, right, to our eye. So I talked about how in a real hotel lobby, the line through the carpet would actually direct guests. And here for us in a painting, it directs our eye. It leads us through in and around the painting from the rotating door at the far left back all the way into the space where, if you look closely, there's actually a clerk behind the desk lit by the lamp. It also divides the space between the man and the woman at left, and then the woman reading at right, putting them in their own little islands. Again, Hopper's often considered this painter of isolation. And here, even though these guests, who are probably perfect strangers to each other, are in the same physical space, he uses this carpet line and some other tricks of perspective to trick the eye to help really create the sense that they're in their own bubbles, both physically and sort of psychologically, right? They're in their own psychological spaces. So it's fantastic. He's really immersed himself in the design elements of hotels, used that to create something that was true to how a hotel lobby would be at the time, but also is a tool for how he creates the emotional content and then the pure compositional content of his paintings, which I find to be truly fantastic. Another painting that would have been a pastiche, but in a very different way, is this Western motel. I had to mention this painting. We actually have a life-size reproduction of this painting that originally we wanted people to be able to walk into. Now, unfortunately, it's roped off because we just couldn't manage it due to COVID. But if you come to the exhibition, we've recreated this space so that you can really get a feeling for this mid-century design that was used in this motel room. I talked about how the lobbies, right, were pastiches of elements assembled over time, but motels, which really popped up right in the post-war period when car travel was really taking off, and when Edward Hopper and his wife were visiting tons of motels because they were traveling all over the country in their Buick at the time. Because motels popped up so quickly all at the same time, they all had up to the minute mid-century modern furnishings, design elements like these big windows, and they're perfect for a Hopper painting because he uses it again and again in his paintings. And I wish I could show you more. You'll have to go to the show. He's known for using these big geometrical elements, right? The big trapezoid of the window, the trapezoid of the light falling across the room is very classic for him. And also just these big blocks of color, the blue sky, the rectangle, the brown rectangle at the end of the bed. And all of these elements are very traditional for his painting and characteristic of him, but also or very well suited to mid-century design and sort of the way that the walls would have been painted, the way that the beds would have been designed. And in this slide, I show you a Western motel that he and his wife stayed at on their travels, and then an advertisement for the type of furniture that was in those motels that was in, again, a hotel management magazine that he would have been pretty familiar with. So he saw so many of these things, and it kind of all came together to inform his artistic style. It wasn't just something that he casually saw. And we know from his wife's diaries that they really were paying attention to every detail. She would record in her diaries the color of the bedspreads where they stayed. And because she was an artist herself with the same training as him, she'd use these really wonderful color names that you could tell were like right off the tube of paint. You know, she had this wonderful vocabulary for color.
So Anna, you touched on a question that was sent to me very lightly, but the two other images that you just showed us had such vibrant colors in them.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about the question that they asked was talk a little bit more about the color palettes, but also how accurate they were to hotels or motels of this time period?
That's a great question. And I don't know who asked this. I feel like you were queuing me up to talk about one of my favorite subjects. So thank you. And it's perfectly timed because I did just reach the end of my rehearsed speech. So the color, I'm so glad you think the color in the slides looks good, because one of the interesting things that happened when we were preparing the exhibition is I was working off of checklists and I was working off of the catalog that was published for the exhibition and, you know, looking at images on the websites of the museums that were lending to us. And I thought the colors were okay, but when I actually got to see the paintings in person, when I went down to Virginia to see their version of the show, it blew my mind. Edward Hopper is a master of color beyond anything I had kind of known. And in this painting, I think the color is a great example of where he would have used paint colors that were popular at the time. But I think he also had a flair for really amping up the color in ways that are a little hard to portray in the slides. The example I always give when I chat about it is there's a painting that isn't depicted here, but and this painting too, like these walls are much less muted in the painting, and then in a reproduction they come across very bright as well. But there was a painting that I never really cared for on the checklist. I thought it was sort of an olive green, but it turned out to be lime, you know, lime green, you know, it was amazing electric sort of sunset scenario, or perhaps a sunrise. So yeah, I guess I just get excited kind of thinking about it. Edward Hopper also, like, his greens are really good. He uses a lot of greens, a lot of corals again and again. And I'm wondering if I go back, like the coral of this woman's dress here is really beautiful and punchy in real life. The green carpet strip's a little richer in real life. And when you walk through the show, it becomes very clear that he had a color palette that he really liked to stick to whenever he could. And in some cases, I do think he amped it up a little bit beyond what you would have expected in a hotel in these certain time periods. But I think in Western Motel, that mid-century modern color palette actually suited his style a little bit. I'm looking at that sort of pink chair in the advertisement right at the top right and kind of feeling like that's a Hopper color. So thanks for leading into one of my favorite subjects. And I'll pull up my Q&A slide just because I really like this picture and wouldn't want to leave it out as we do questions.
Claudette, I know you had a question in the chat. If you want to unmute yourself and just ask it directly, I think that we can do that with this group.
So you used the word pastiche several times.
Oh, sure.
I have a general idea of what it means, but I'm not sure I can relate it to the specific artwork that you're talking about.
Sure. Okay. Thank you. I definitely appreciate that. Sometimes I will use, you know, an art historian vocabulary and then realize that, you know, it missed the point. So I'll go back to Hotel Lobby to illustrate. When I say it's a pastiche, I mean that he brought together elements that he observed in lots of different hotel lobbies and sort of compiled them into one image, right? So he was picking and choosing chairs that he saw somewhere and maybe sketched versus a green carpet strip maybe he saw somewhere else. So when I say pastel, and you know, and all of those he would have sketched and kind of worked out, played around with how he wanted them in relationship to each other. So I tried to show the two sketches in the slide as well. So you can see, first he was playing with a chair with a ruffled bottom, and then he decided to have more of a clean lined chair. The woman's bangs disappear and come back. So he's bringing together lots of different elements into what I would call a pastiche versus something like in Rooms for Tourists, where this is mostly how this building looks. If you look closely at the sketches, you can see he made a few tweaks and changes, but for the most part, he was sketching and then painting this building as it existed in real life. So I hope that makes sense, Claudette.
Yes, it does. Thanks.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, happy.
Great. You know, I had a question that I will ask if nobody else cuts me off and jumps in. I'm always struck by Hopper, I think you can tell from an artist how they feel about people, about women, about men by the way that they draw them. And I've always been fascinated, the women that he draws are just, they're beautiful. And where in different places there isn't a ton of attention to detail, I think the way that he draws women's legs or their profile, is, and I think in that first picture and then in the last image that you showed, that's really what kind of jumps out at me, pretty significantly, is the beauty of the women that he's drawing as well.
I love that observation. And I will give a fun fact that I didn't get to mention when I introduced Joe, although that's who we're looking at here in this watercolor. His wife, Josephine, was the model for every single one of the paintings that we just looked at. So, they had a very interesting relationship. She was super chatty, and he was very quiet. And I think they drove each other crazy on these long road trips. But at the end, and in her diaries, they get into these raging fights and things like that. But there's also a sense that they really cared, really loved and cared for each other. And so I love you kind of mentioning the sort of loving attention to detail on the women, and then knowing that it was her posing for them every time. I don't know. I think I just made a little bit of a connection there from your observation that I hadn't really thought about.
That's great, Anna. So there's a question in the chat from Rachel. Rachel, do you want to just unmute and ask it, or do you want me to read it for you?
I'm happy to ask it. First of all, thank you, Anna. This is an amazing talk. And I wanted to know two things. Can you talk a little bit more about Hopper's light sources? He seems to use very, very strong directional light sources in almost a Caravaggesque sense.
Oh, yeah.
Whether they're from lamps or from windows. And then I also wanted to hear your take on why Hopper is considered the artist of loneliness. And do you think that that's an appropriate moniker for him?
Oh, yeah. Oh my gosh, you guys are asking really good questions. I'll go back to an image where you can see a little bit of his light. I call these the trapezoids of light. I've been kind of offhand referring to them this way over and over again, because what you're seeing here appears again and again and again in his paintings. He's a really amazing painter of light, but he often does it in a very geometric way. So again and again, in Hopper paintings, you'll often see a woman seated in front of a window being sort of blasted right by light, and he puts this big beam down the wall where you can see it. That's why I call it the trapezoid, right? Because it's often coming at this sharp angle. And I think he is drawing on this great tradition of artists sort of experimenting with strong light. And I love the Caravaggesque reference, that Caravaggio used strong, dramatic, theater-like lighting to create an emotional effect. And I think the directness of the light on the figure does help sort of throw them, into contrast, right? In a way that allows us to sort of, I like that you can kind of read different emotional qualities into Hopper, which kind of gets to your second question. But I think the strongness of the light helps create a little bit more emotional tension. And that just might be me, the way I read it as well. I'm sure there are other Hopper scholars out there who would want to have a lively debate about this.
If you go back to the first picture, Anna, the light is really interesting in that one as well. Just with the little dots across I guess I'm curious to see what that looks like in person.
I hope you come see it and do. Yeah. Is that wait, you mean this one?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. And again, the trapezoid is broken up here a little bit because there's more textures behind it, but you can see it, right? That there's strong angles of light. But I think he was an artist that, even though he did very figurative art, he was still very influenced, I think, by the modernist tradition, right? Because by the time he was working in the 1940s, these were the days of, Jackson Pollock, right? So I think there was a great tradition that had already developed of artists using geometric abstraction, right? Where you would use, reduce things to their essential shapes. And though Hopper always keeps our figure and our recognizable subject matter, I think he's using these geometries, in using the light to help create those geometries within his painting. So I hope that answer made sense for part one. And then for part two, the painter of loneliness, and we'll stay on 11 a.m. because this is one you could definitely read as lonely, right? He himself did say at one point but he may have just been responding in a frustrated moment to an interview when he was quite famous, that, oh, the loneliness thing is overplayed. And so, I do want to take him at his word, but I think if you read loneliness into these paintings, that is I think that's fair. I think the interesting thing about Hopper paintings is he's so good at making us feel like we are picking up a story in the middle of things, right? That something has happened and then something's going to happen after this, but we are seeing our hero in a pause point between two action scenes, in the film. And he was very influenced by film, I should mention. He loved movies and would go on, he literally uses the word movie binge in a quote, that he would go to the theaters and watch movies forever. Which today in the, age of binge watching, it was so great that he had such a perfect, easy quote for us to use. But I think because he does give us the sense that we're in the middle of a larger narrative, it makes it easy for us to read a number of types of interpretations in. And this was a time in the 20th century when there was a lot of talk about sort of the loneliness of being a single person in the big city, right? Oh, I'm surrounded by people, but still feel alone. And then this was the first time that narrative was becoming very common in American culture. So I think it helps that he was at this, working in that exact same moment when that was a popular narrative. But again, I would never want to interpret this as being only about loneliness or isolation, when it could also be a moment of pause in something that is a little less depressing. And I think leaving it open for interpretation is part of the joy. And I think that's part of, I like to think it's one of the reasons that Hopper is still successful and known to this day. I think it's, there's a real pleasure in sort of reading an emotional state into this. And I'm sure you've seen things where he was called the artist of quarantine, right? Because I think we all had those moments of just looking out the window.
No doubt.
Again, it's great. We were able to sort of read our own contemporary moment into a painting. And that's what makes something a classic, right? Is that it stays relevant. So that's
wonderful. That's wonderful. So I've got two questions that were sent to me. One was, are there any paintings that are of hotels in Indianapolis or Indiana in the exhibit? And then the follow-up to that would be, did Hopper focus on only certain geographic locations of hotels, or did he focus more on rural versus urban or vice versa?
Unfortunately, we don't have any Indianapolis paintings, and I didn't find any record. At one point, there's a large map in the exhibition where we track 3 of his trips just to give a sense of how far he and his wife traveled across the United States and Mexico on a number of their trips. And we really wanted to, have some sort of Indiana, we wanted to call it out. And the closest thing we could get was that they did go to the dunes on one of their trips. And they did drive through Indiana, but just, there weren't any notable stops, which is a little unfair because the exhibition was in Richmond, Virginia first. And one of the paintings in the exhibition is a painting of a building that he did in Richmond. And so they get to have their local pride, So unfortunately, the dunes are the closest thing we have, where he stopped a couple times on, because he was going from New York and then out across west and then back. So he would pass through sometimes. And then, shoot, I forgot. Oh, part 2 was urban versus rural.
Yeah.
It's a mix. There's a few, there really are. There's actually a whole gallery in the exhibition dedicated to urban tendency. He lived on Washington Square in Greenwich Village, and there's a number of scenes painted out his window from his studio across the square, because right across the square, there was a hotel, and so he painted that hotel. But then he would also go out on these big road trips and paint, he would paint rural homes. He would paint things he was originally from a suburb of New York, a smaller town outside of the city, and he would paint the types of old Victorian buildings that populated those types of towns outside of the city. And then he would paint, motels and gas stations in the middle of nowhere, because motels, characteristically weren't in town, right? They were on the side of the freeway a little bit further out. So it was truly a mix. I think I feel pretty comfortable saying that. Sometimes I worry and try to hedge that statement a little bit, but I'm pretty confident saying it was a healthy mix of all types. He was, I think, just interested in a lot of different types of architecture as well up here again and again. So.
That's wonderful, Anna. Thank you so much.